Okay, good morning. Is everybody ready to start? We get going with this? Gordy, it's nice to see you back. Yeah, we missed you. Welcome back to our forum on a Wednesday morning from 8 to 9. And I say at 8 to 9 because at 9 o'clock the police come in. You're thinking you're in a third world country. The cadets come in for their program, so we get this started right at 9. I'm not going to sit up here as much as you enjoy listening to me sit up here and drone on. We've got a really big, full program with lots of great information. Today's topic is, did I introduce myself? I'm Phoebe Binziger. I'm one of the fourth forum facilitators. That's hard to say. With Kathy Heavers, Judy Ann Files, and Barbara Bynum. We meet here every Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock, and we promise that you will leave informed with something that you think, well, it could be boring, or I really want to know about that. It's worth your time. And I know I've seen what's coming up on the docket in the future weeks. We've got some really cool things coming forward. So today's program is about West Nile virus. And last year in Montrose County, we led the state with 38 positive cases, 6 deaths, and 26 hospitalizations. That's not something we want to repeat. So our county health department has really become proactive in putting the word out on how to prevent West Nile virus and symptoms, and you're going to hear all that. I'm not going to take their program away from them. We have Len Cribbs. He's from Cobble Creek. Len and Lori. I say it's like they both got West Nile. They did not. He did, but Lori felt it and was with Len every step of the way. That I know. And so Len is going to come up and tell his story, and which is fascinating. And then our next speaker will be Jim Austin. He's the public health director for Montrose County. He's been with the county at the public health department for the last 10 years as the director the last three years. And then we also have 3 very, I've always found them calming when I see them walk into a room. Katie, Erica, and Lisa, they're with the county and the health department, Lisa is. And so they're here to help support. And so as always, let's keep questions for Len, if that's okay with you, Len, till the end, and for the county at the very end of the program, so we can bring the mic to you so everybody else can hear the question. So I'm going to start with Len. Len's been most gracious to come up and tell his story, and it's fascinating. Yeah, so Len, come on up, please.
Good morning. Forgive me, I'm going to partially read what I'm going to speak to you. Otherwise, I would probably drone on for an hour. So, starting off, during the third week of July, 2022, I'm old, okay? During that last or third week of July, we enjoyed a day hike in the Cimarrons. I played 63 holes of golf in a tournament and enjoyed the company of a good friend. On the following Monday, we took a Jeep trip up to Yankee Boy to see the beautiful flowers and just enjoy the day. That was pretty much life as we knew it prior to West Nile. As I woke on the following day, Tuesday of the next week, I had a headache and in general felt like I had the flu, just overall body aches and fatigue. For the next 2 days, I just laid around the house. I don't even remember. Lori told me I basically went from one bedroom to the other bedroom just looking for a place to try and get comfortable. Just increasing lethargy over those 2 days. Had a teledoc appointment on Thursday in which I was incorrectly diagnosed with having COVID, like everybody else did at the time. As we moved into Friday, Lori found that I had a 104-degree fever. She loaded me in a car at that point in time and took me to the hospital. Once in the hospital, I was really pretty much out of it. I don't even remember much of being in there. But they admitted me to the hospital with life-threatening conditions. Later diagnosed me as having spinal meningitis with a spinal tap. I started on IV antiviral medication at that time. I believe it was every 12 hours. I had an infusion for the following 14 days. Very little memory of the time in the hospital. I was just out of it the entire time, slept pretty much the entire time, and I couldn't even walk. I remember one day having dinner when they put the plate in front of me, just picking up the plate and moving it. It was heavy, just a dinner plate with food. Following the 4 days in the hospital, I was transferred to Colorado in Olathe, where they could continue the IV treatment. I couldn't walk on my own at that point in time, and I probably, about the only time I remember being awake was when the nurse would come in and give me the antiviral medication. I was in Colorado for 14 days. While there, I was given occupational and physical therapy. So after 14 days in Colorado, I was at least able to walk with the aid of a cane or a walker. So after 18 total days, I was released to home. Again, all I remember is I just slept most of the time, even after I got home. But after being home for about a week, I started physical therapy and speech therapy. The speech therapy was particularly difficult for me because in the speech therapy, the therapist would give me simple problems that probably a first grader could solve, and I couldn't do them. I would start doing them, and my brain would become overloaded, and I would just shut down. I could handle one thought at a time, but trying to process 2 thoughts at a time was just too much for me. Lori came up with the best analogy that I heard of at this point in time. My brain was basically like a battery. The more inputs you get, the more you drain the battery. And then at such a point in time, my battery would be so drained, I couldn't think anymore. I just shut down. So I slowly improved over the next couple of months. And finally by, I guess, November, December, I could do most everything I wanted to do. I still had tremors, brain fog, and fatigue and vertigo. Fatigue was bad. I could do things like for a half a day, and then I would have to sleep. Finally, I want to back up here a second. About a month after being in the hospital, I finally got the correct diagnosis of West Nile. Really probably wouldn't have changed anything, but it was nice to finally know the correct diagnosis. By April of this year, my most pressing symptoms were fatigue and tremors. And at that point in time, we actually enjoyed an RV trip through Utah, 2 to 3 weeks. At that point in time, we really thought the worst was behind us, and maybe we were going to actually get over this dreadful disease. Unfortunately, I was back in the hospital in mid-May with breathing problems. These have continued to plague me to this day. I'm on oxygen at night. I'm on oxygen if I do any physical activity. Sitting around the house, I'm okay. Most people that have had West Nile neuroinvasive disease have a similar story. It's common throughout the situation of the disease. Many people who were infected 10, 15, 20 years ago still have symptoms that impact their daily life. Never get over it. So as you look at me this morning, even though I have a raspy voice, I probably look like a relatively healthy 69-year-old. I can tell you that's not the truth. I still have symptoms that will probably plague me the rest of my life. So a mosquito bite can lead to anything from flu-like symptoms to spinal meningitis or encephalitis. Encephalitis often leads to paralysis or death. So Lori and I have basically been on a mission these last few months to educate you. And I'm looking through the crowd here. I see a lot of over 60-year-olds. You're the target for this disease. So educate yourself, educate your family and friends. Lori and I don't want to see anybody else go through what we've gone through. And I'll have to add, as a final point, this has been bad on me, but it affects your family. I can't. Thank you.
Actually, we could just call it quits now. I mean, that was a great presentation. Yeah. So I think, Len, we'll just have questions at the end, okay? And when you hear Len talk about his brain fog, I mean, that had to be so hard because he has a PhD in chemistry. They moved here from Cincinnati about 10 years ago to go from PhD in chemistry to not even being able to put two thought processes together had to be scary and difficult. And yeah, and Lori, they have really become advocates. Lori is at golf tournaments, and so is Len, handing out the correct formula to use. And yeah, thank you for becoming those people that do that for us. Our next speaker is Jim Austin, so we'll continue this and go from there.
Good morning. Len, your story is the highlight this morning. I'm going to pretend to follow that. So thank you and Linda both. That means so much. We had the privilege of meeting Len and Linda several weeks ago at their home, hearing the story, and they graciously allowed this to be filmed and publicized. I'll speak about that in a minute. But what I can tell you is this is benefiting people all over the state of Colorado. I've sent the video, besides our normal distribution channels, but our partners at the State Health Department, they highly complimented the video and the content, and they have publicized it, and so thank you. Okay, I have some slides I'd like to go through with you, but first, with me this morning is Lisa Gallegos of my staff here on the front row. Lisa oversees our communicable disease response at Public Health. So if you have any questions at the end about what the health department does when we get a report of West Nile virus, Lisa will be able to answer that for you. There's reporting that needs to be done and interviewing which she does. Also wanted to let you know that due to the high number of cases that we had last year, we've really stepped up our outreach and education countywide this year. And so a few ways that we're doing that, to HOAs specifically, not only individual HOAs, but there's a couple of management companies here in town that administer the HOAs, and they have been very cooperative to disseminate this information to the HOA officers. Also at special events like the Summer Music Series, Corn Fest, Funk Fest coming up, we have the mosquito wipes. I'm sure you all have the wipes or the spray. There's lots of ways to protect yourself, and they have been gracious to take some of the wipes and distribute those. And I said, now these aren't a penny each, so don't hand them out like candy. But I said, it's the over 50 or 55 crowd, and that's me too, and that's who the virus is hardest on, and so especially for our generation. With the city and the town, David Spear and William Woody, thank you for your efforts in publicizing this. Also have contacted the town of Olathe, Nucla, and Naturita on the west end. The rec district, the pavilion, and then our county medical advisor, who's across the alley from us, Dr. Joe Adragna, has made sure that through the hospital with the medical education efforts, that West Nile was highlighted again this year. So I think all that's really important in terms of casting as wide a net as we can in terms of education and promotion. West Nile infects people generally beginning in the late summer, and that's been no exception this year. So even though we began our promotion efforts earlier in the summer, people are starting to become infected now. Just last week, so far we're aware of 3 human cases in Colorado. Last week, one in La Plata County, one in Larimer County, South Fort Collins, and then yesterday from Delta County. So the virus normally exists here in western Colorado. It's entrenched, and so that's one reason why we just need to be aware every year. And I am aware that any sort of messaging, especially from governmental agencies like public health, you tend to tune it out. So do I. You hear the same things every year. But due to the cases, I'm asking you to give special attention and diligence this year, that we all protect ourselves and our neighbors and those we love. Okay, for some slides. First, just wanted to some highlights this morning. West Nile was first discovered, as you can see, a number of decades ago, but first appeared in the U.S. in 1999 in New York. And notice this third bullet point, that within 5 years, by 2004, it had basically spread across the U.S. And the next 3 slides that I have from CDC are very instructive in just showing how the virus is spread. Erica, will this work if I go over to this side? I'll try it. A little bit easier if I'm over here. Let me see if I can advance it. Can you advance it for me? Okay, this slide from CDC is showing a calendar year 1999. The first year the virus was detected and traced in the United States. Well, and there's New York City, and there's New Jersey. And notice that these are not human cases. These are in animals, mosquitoes, birds, and mammals. And so I'm gonna, let me see if I can do this. And each map will show the following year, and you'll be able to see how quickly this virus spread across the U.S. Here's 1 year later. Now notice that these are still, the infected are animals such as, again, mosquitoes, birds, and mammals. And that starts to change in 2001. Florida, now the southeast. Blue cases, the blue dots are human cases. 1 year later, 2002. And so it's moving obviously westerly. 2003, 1 year later. Almost looks as though there's a line about the Continental Divide, doesn't there? And the upper Great Plains, the blue, those are all human cases of West Nile virus. And then actually, for some reason when I copied and pasted this is from 2004, and it's showing the blue, the human disease in every state, except, as you can see, in the far northwest, none in Washington. This is 2004, just the early years. And you can also see in the Pacific Northwest, relatively little activity, but look at the number of cases in the Southwest: Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, California. This is a Western U.S. disease. So I found that very instructive. And also, if you look at New England, they're all animal cases, no human. And so, anyway, I think that does a good job of showing you how quickly the virus progressed across the United States. Is this the next one, or did I skip one? Hold on. Hold on. This is the next one. Just a little diagram of the Culex mosquito, life cycle. The eggs are laid in water. If you remember from science many years ago, the metamorphosis to a larvae, then to a pupa, and then emerging into the air as the flying adult mosquito. So that's a typical life cycle slide. And of course, it is the adult female mosquito who needs a blood meal, and that's us. This is a diagram, and I hope you can read it. I actually have some hard copies over here. This is a really good slide from CDC showing the transmission cycle. The virus normally, in the center here, normally cycles and passes between birds and the mosquitoes. The mosquitoes can then bite animals like horses, mammals, us. However, the good news is, you see where it says we're called a dead-end host, meaning that we're not capable of being part of the chain of transmission. It stops with us. But this is a good one to show you the normal cycle in the middle, and then how the mosquitoes can then bite and infect others. Just a little bit about mosquitoes now. As the previous slide showed, the eggs are laid in water. Female mosquitoes lay lots of eggs. It's about 200, obviously it can be more than that, about every 3 days. All the way from the egg stage to the flying adult, depending on the species of mosquito and the environmental conditions, about 10 to 14 days. So for example, even if there were some treatment, some spray, for example, that killed adult mosquitoes, in another 10 to 14 days, they're going to be back, a new generation. And then mosquitoes, the aquatic stage, the larva and the pupa, of course, are in standing stagnant water. Excuse me. Now I want to give some visual examples of mosquito breeding habitat, because controlling this is key. If you can eliminate the standing water, the areas where they breed, then that's the most effective way to control mosquitoes. So this first one, just get you thinking about your property. Areas where there's standing water, tires, tarps, sagging tarps, old bird baths that haven't been looked at in a while, clogged gutters. You know, since they're overhead, we don't think about them, but if they're clogged with leaves or pine needles, and that stagnant water can sit for days and days and days. Just another one. Notice the uncovered boats, kayaks, canoes, paddle boats, anything where water sits for days and days. That's potential mosquito breeding habitat. We wanted to show you a few pictures. You say, how'd they get in my backyard? There's a tire. That little insert is showing the wigglers, the larvae, the mosquito larvae, for example, in water and tires. And then just a couple of shots of ungraded areas, maybe some overwatering. It could be filled or regraded. Bird baths. Low spots in lawns, for example. So if these can be controlled, bird baths, if these can be controlled, it interrupts the life cycle, and there's no aquatic habitat for the larvae and pupa. So that's why this is so important. And so as you think about your property, remember this. Yeah, flower pots. Okay, I want to give you just some summary information from the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment website. And by the way, if you, the easiest way to get this information online is if you just type in CDPHE and then the words West Nile Virus, it'll take you right to the page. The state generally refers you to the CDC. That's where the most comprehensive information is. So if you type in also just CDC for Centers for Disease Control, and then type in the 3 words West Nile Virus, it will take you to more information than you can use. It's all there. You can look at you can in fact look at data not only by state but by county and by year. It's a huge database, and so I would encourage you to go there if you're interested. So let me give you some summary information. West Nile virus is a reportable condition in Colorado. The State Board of Health has rules about which infectious conditions are reportable to be investigated and tracked, and this is one of many. Laboratories, they must report acute infections within 4 working days, and they can report either to the state health department or they can report to the local health department. There is a statewide database that all this is entered into. Now, if a patient is positive for West Nile virus, the local health agency, and in here, that's going to be Lisa, she follows up with the patient with a patient interview. That's required. So from the state, just to review the most important information, what is the virus? It's one that's most commonly spread by infected, and again, it's the infected female mosquito. People can't give West Nile to other people. Remember, we're a dead-end host. And the risk to humans occurs primarily from June through early September. It's the warm season when mosquitoes are active. The Culex mosquito, which primarily is responsible for the spread of West Nile virus, is active in the late summer. Now, we begin our publicity efforts in the early summer. We want to start early. And so that's why we're starting to see the people infected now. Here we are in August, and this is very typical. How do people get infected? You get infected from the bite of an infected female mosquito. Mosquitoes become infected when they feed on the infected birds. Some birds seem to naturally carry this virus, and the mosquitoes can then spread the virus to humans, other mammals, and birds. And Len touched on this, but I want to highlight it again. Who's at risk? Well, anyone living in an area like here where West Nile virus is present can get infected. The risk of infection is highest for people who work outside or you're outdoors a lot, because you're going to be more exposed to mosquitoes, obviously. People of any age can be infected. However, older people are at greatest risk for severe disease. Folks with conditions such as cancer, diabetes, hypertension, kidney disease, organ transplants, they're at greater risk for serious illness. The symptoms. CDC estimates 80% of people who get infected don't have symptoms. They're asymptomatic. That's why they say most people infected don't get sick. For people who do, the time between the time of the mosquito bite and the onset of symptoms, it can range from 2 to 14 days. That's also known as the incubation period, from the time you're exposed till the time you begin to show symptoms. So there's a range. In rare cases, the virus can cause a serious brain infection, such as meningitis or encephalitis. These infections begin suddenly with a high fever and headache that can progress to stiff neck, disorientation, and you can read it. Severe infections can result in permanent brain damage or death. Most deaths occur in persons over 50 years of age. There's no treatment for the virus other than supportive care, and there's no vaccine to prevent it, that is, for human beings. For example, you can vaccinate your horses, but there's no vaccine for people. The last slide here is, so how do we protect ourselves from getting the virus? This is all about prevention. The most effective way is to prevent mosquito bites. It's transmitted by mosquito bites, so if you can avoid mosquito bites, that is the strategy. Use insect repellents or wipes when you go outdoors. Repellents containing DEET provide the best protection. And so invariably, the wipes as well as the mosquito spray, you look at the label and it will tell you like 20, 25, 30% DEET. And those are good products. Another wise thing to do is limit outdoor activities at dusk and dawn, when mosquitoes that carry West Nile are the most active. A couple of nights ago, around 7 or 7:30, I was just sitting on my front porch with a cup of coffee, and here came the mosquitoes, and I thought, you know what, Jim? You're 70, go inside, which I did. And so part of it is we just have to be aware and just be wise. Wear protective clothing, long pants, long sleeve shirts and socks, and that is not convenient in summer, I know. But the idea is prevent mosquito bites. In areas where mosquitoes are active, you can spray your clothes with repellent for extra protection. And then to mosquito-proof your home, back to the slides a few minutes ago, drain standing water around your house often. Now, I do want to say some people overreact a little bit here. You remember the life cycle is 12 days, so you don't have to empty your flower pots every day. And so every few days, interrupt that cycle, but it doesn't have to be every day. So, but drain the standing water around your house often. Empty water from tires, cans, flower pots, clogged gutters, rain barrels, bird baths, toys, puddles, low spots, kids' wagons, the paddle boat that hadn't been used in a few weeks, those things. And then install or repair screens on windows and doors, and that's to exclude the mosquitoes from your house. That is my slide presentation. I wanted to mention a couple of other things. On this table over here, I have some written materials for you. And boy, I think I brought about 40 or 50 of each. You can download these, but I thought I wanted to provide some nice copies for you. One of those, if you go to the State Health Department page on West Nile Virus, there's a document linked, and it's actually from CSU Extension. And it's all about mosquitoes and all about West Nile Virus. It's 20 pages long. However, for easy reading, it's in a question and answer format by subject. It is comprehensive. I was able to just touch some high points this morning, but I have copies of that over there, so I welcome you to take one. You'll find it very interesting. Also, there are CDC flyers, some on the dunks that we give away. You know, they look like little briquettes or donuts. They contain a bacterium that dissolves in the water, let's say some standing water or a trough, and that kills the mosquito larvae. That's safe. It's not a toxic material. It's actually bacteria. The CDC has so much information, so many fact sheets that I think you'll find useful, but I've printed that one off. And then last of all, we have dunks. So if you need some this morning, you're in the right place. These are not for use in moving water like irrigation ditches, but think of stagnant or standing water, or if you have a pond around the edges, in the middle where it tends to be more aerated, maybe you get some wave action. That's not really the problem area. The problem is the standing water. Now these dunks come in, or the product called BTI, that stands for the type of bacteria, the name. It comes in several forms. We just provide the dunks. They look like little donuts. You can break them up, you can throw them in the water whole, but you can also get it in a granular form and broadcast it by hand if you'd like. But we've provided these at the health department for many years as a courtesy every summer. We're just giving a lot more away this summer, and for which I'm glad. Many of our members of HOAs are coming in and requesting mosquito dunks. So those are on the table as you leave. And Katie, would you like to come up and just talk about some of the media and social media outreach?
Thank you. Okay, I'm Katie Jorgensen. I am the Communications Director for Montrose County. I hope you, well, we're gonna play the video, and then I'll give some remarks. How about that? So this is the video that, This was the video that we created. Perhaps you've seen this. It's been out for about a month, almost. Okay.
It's Len Cribbs of Montrose, Colorado. I'm here today to tell you about my infection with West Nile virus and my journey since then. Prior to getting West Nile virus last year, I really felt bulletproof. I had a very active lifestyle. In the summertime, I typically played golf 2 or 3 times a week. It was not unusual for us to go on a hike somewhere up in the mountains. When my wife and I would be outside together, mosquitoes would be all over her and they would very rarely bother me. I was bit by a mosquito in late July of 2022. When I became infected, the first couple of days I felt flu-like symptoms, and about the 4th day of feeling bad, my wife checked my temperature and I was 104 degrees. So at that point in time, she loaded me into the car and we went off to the hospital. Looking back at the paperwork since then, I was admitted in life-threatening condition. So I spent 4 days in the hospital. Following the 4 days in the hospital, I was released to Colorado and Olathe long-term care for 2 weeks. Following that, I was released home for physical therapy, and my progress in recovery has continued over the 10 months since that time. West Nile virus has had an incredible impact on my life. We live in Montrose because we like to play in the outdoors, hike, ski, jeep, etc. And for the last 10 months, I've been very limited on what I've been able to do. And now my word to everyone is this is a disease that you can protect yourself against fairly readily. So just wear DEET or some other kind of protectant and make sure you have long sleeves. It's likely that I was bitten by a mosquito and given West Nile virus here in the neighborhood. So look around your environment, whether it's your yard, your friend's yard, golf course, whatever. Look for any places where mosquitoes are apt to breed, and that primarily includes standing water. So don't allow any standing water in buckets or ditches or anything around your house. And if you do have standing water that you can't get rid of, then apply granules or dunks or some manner to break up the life cycle of the mosquitoes. Mosquitoes are not just pesky and bothersome, but they're also vectors of deadly diseases. No one is immune to this. Everyone is susceptible to being bitten, and all it takes is one little mosquito that's infected with West Nile to bite you, and it will change your life forever.
Okay, thank you. So I want to do a quick poll here. If you can remember, I'll say that because sometimes this tricks me, pre-COVID, Pre-COVID, how many of you really gave a lot of thought to your outdoor activities and whether or not, you were taking these preventative measures, whether you were wearing deep, long sleeve stuff outdoors? Yeah, a little bit, right? I mean, mosquitoes are kind of more of a nuisance. And that's how I perceived them growing up in Minnesota. The joke that we say is that mosquitoes are the state bird. Land of 10,000 lakes and boatloads of mosquitoes. After seeing the video and after hearing Len's powerful story this morning, you think you might maybe change some actions? Mentioning these things to friends and family? Okay, so our goal here is to change habits. And I'm going to ask for a little bit of latitude here because I've been with the county for a decade. And anecdotally, we say that people, when we're providing government communications, they don't always listen. Jim kind of alluded to this, unless something directly and potentially negatively impacts them. So I can stand up here, I can go out, and I can talk until I'm blue in the face about West Nile virus, but it's not going to have the same impact as Len's story will. We are so incredibly grateful to Len and Lori for opening their homes and for sharing this because I'm knocking on wood here. It has been, I think, not only our outreach efforts has been significantly better this year, which is projected to be, a more negative year for West Nile virus. So things that we've done, last year we had a video with Lisa, and Lisa did a bilingual video as well, and Dr. Joe Dragna. And we provided that. We did a lot of the same kind of social stuff, but again, without this story, and without this personal knowledge of, a community member, a friend, a loved one, a family member, it really may not make those changes in habits. So we've been able to take this story this year, and as Jim had mentioned, we received accolades across the state from other public health departments as well, and people who are utilizing a lot of these materials. We've broadcast it out on social media. Len, I think, has talked to every reporter in a 90-mile radius. Half the time I felt so bad I was forwarding emails to Len and Lori saying, here's another, could you have KKCO come into your home? And they were fantastic. As a side note, I will just say that Len you were amazing. You're truly amazing on video. We would give a quick suggestion of advice, and I thought I was working with a trained actor. He was so good. He would just perform flawlessly. So Jim has done a fantastic job. We've, again, provided that outreach at a lot of different events. I mentioned social media. We've worked with traditional media. We are targeting and looking at more of a senior population. So there's a fantastic article in the Beacon, if you haven't read that. It's a senior newspaper. We also have bilingual resources. We've been working with Spanish newspapers and other outlets. As Jim mentioned, we have our dunks available here. But ultimately, too, I'm going to reiterate, our goal is to make those changes to the habits. So anecdotally, at my house, we have, in my back door, I have a little basket that has sunscreen, and it has bug spray for my kids. And it's just something that, hey, you step outside and you take care of your sunscreen or your bug spray or whatever. So that's really what we're encouraging people to do. So our ask for you today is that you not only work on embracing and changing these habits, but that you share that, because that word of mouth is going to be one of our most powerful tools. So talking to your friends and to your family, not only about the story if you haven't heard it, but the simple ways to protect yourself. Because the mosquitoes are definitely, as we've all heard today, they're much more than a nuisance. They have significantly deadly potential, and it is only standing to increase. So we just ask that you help us in these outreach efforts. And with that, 8:45, that is fantastic.
You're amazing.
We'd be happy to take some questions, and I believe Len's open for questions as well. Okay.
All right, let's give everybody a round of applause before we So yes, if you have questions for Jim, for Katie, for Lisa, or for Len, okay, I'll bring the microphone to you.
Is West Nile virus related at all to the Lyme's disease from ticks? It sounds very similar.
Different organism. In fact, thank you for asking about Lyme disease. You did mention there may be a question or two about Lyme disease. The state health department actually employs a doctoral medical entomologist. And I asked him about that, and he said, well, fortunately, the tick that carries that is not native to Colorado, so that's the reason I didn't include it here. It's really more back east, especially in the mid-Atlantic region, but different organism.
How long does the virus stay in your body if you've had it? I
Ooh,
was
that
diagnosed with it, blood draw.
would be a question for your medical provider. I do not know. Lisa, do you know the answer?
It's different with everybody. It could be different for everybody, but they say that if you get West Nile once, you won't get it again. But your symptoms may continue to come back, like with Len.
I've read I joked with my physician, I've read enough research papers to have a master's in West Nile. There have been some people that West Nile virus has been found in their kidneys long after infection.
Like years?
Yes.
Thank you. For about 8 or 10 years, we've used citronella geraniums on our patio, and we haven't had a mosquito on our patio the entire time, whereas there may be mosquitoes within 50 yards. Is there any scientific basis that says that they're worthwhile?
Yeah, citronella is worthwhile. A lot of people use citronella torches. Let me see what I can find. I'll be glad to forward it to you, Judy.
There's a Consumer Reports study on that shows a lot of the, There's a Consumer Reports study on various repellents, and in general, most of them were found to be non-effective.
How about those new mosquito bombs that you're hearing about people buy on Amazon and you just plug it up and it goes?
I've read poor reports on them too.
I was in Hawaii while we were trying to stop a dengue virus infestation and doing the same thing, dumping the water out, watching everything. If we had plants that would collect irrigation water or rainwater and then keep it in the little folds of the leaves, there was a recipe for to make your own spray. It was water with a little bit of bleach and some detergent. And you would spray it in the plants, and the detergent would destroy the surface tension of the water so that the eggs couldn't go in there. Is that a possibility to do here?
I think that sounds right. I've not heard about that specifically, but you're correct. Because the rafts of eggs are laid on the surface.
Okay, another question?
Can I just add to that, Phoebe? So, there's so many different things, and I see a lot of things on social media, like, the bug zappers or anything noise-oriented. At the end of the day, we know what works, and what works is wearing that protective clothing, using DEET. Certainly you can look at some of these alternatives, but let's, just kind of keep in mind some of those things, or even as Jim had mentioned, going inside while he was having coffee because he was aware of the situation and aware of what's happening.
So, having been through this, we get this comment a lot about, I don't want to use anything but natural. And my comment to you now is, if we know there's only pesky mosquitoes out there, go for it. Citronella, I wanted to do all that as well. But today, we know there's West Nile in the area. Protect yourself.
Well stated, yeah. Did you have another question?
I was told that I should be retested to see if it's active in my body.
There's tests that they draw when they draw it, and one will tell you if it's active and one will tell you if you've had it in the past. So yeah, those tests are there.
So Katie, Jim, how do you, what's your timeline? Like you said, Delta had a positive yesterday, and then do you put that out to all social media, the paper? I mean, do you feel reflexively you have to start putting that out so that people are aware that it's, yeah?
We've continued our publicity efforts, as Jim had mentioned, probably for the past month or so, a little bit longer. It's a fine balance. So we certainly look at things like message fatigue. So people may be seeing similar ads over and over again, and it may not resonate in the same way. There's a lot that we've learned from COVID, and there's a lot of same things. So, similarly, Delta has a case. Delta typically has cases. Well, does it mean the mosquitoes in Delta are going to be the same as the mosquitoes here? As we've seen, there are mosquitoes that may be in a particular area that are infected with West Nile, but it doesn't mean all of them. So I think as, again, that blanket precaution we go back to is just protect yourself because you don't know. And that there's not a singular way to tell that, the mosquitoes at my house west of Montrose all have West Nile virus. So yes, we will continue to push out information and to mention that because we have people who recreate. We have people who, go out and about all around our beautiful region. So maybe it's just, hey, be advised wherever you're going. And I don't think it necessarily matters as much that Delta has a case because, again, at the end of the day, you should be taking those precautionary measures as well. So one of the things, though, that Eric and I were just talking about this week is, we've gratefully had some, moisture recently, which has been wonderful, wonderful reprieve from the heat. However, have you checked your wheelbarrows? Have you checked, all the things in your backyard that may be collecting water? So we've talked about, working on that kind of messaging instead of just, hey, by the way, there's your keys nearby.
Sure, yeah. Boy, I had a really good question, but I just lost it. Wouldn't it be so great if they had a combination insect repellent and sunscreen in one spray?
I feel like I've seen that. However, I'm gonna go back to what works, and I know what works. Like it's kind of the thing. Like I have my kids at the beach recently, and we used some spray sunscreen, and I think we went into the water too soon, and they had a little bit of sunburn. So now I'm like, I'm gonna lather you with zinc.
Well, yeah, that's the world they grow up in. I just had my grandkids, and we sprayed them down outside and sprayed them down. It's a constant, like, put them through the car wash spray thing. Like, just walk through here, and you're gonna get sprayed with something, yeah, so.
Yeah, and again, going back to those habits, every time you get in a car, you buckle up, right? You put your seatbelt on because it has potential to save your life. Before you head outside, make sure that you've got the necessary precautions.
So does anybody else have another question? We have time for one more. If not, I'll say again, as Katie so well stated, Len and Lori, you guys did not ask to be the poster child for West Nile virus, but what you're doing for your own little community, for our community, and now for the state, we can't thank you enough because I know but you look great. Compared to there and now, things are looking better. And so thank you for doing that. Let's give Jim and Katie and Lisa